Atlantis is waiting. What do you say?
While it was in production, everyone at Disney thought the 2001 animated adventure Atlantis: The Lost Empire was going to be a huge deal. Before the movie even hit theaters, the House of Mouse went into production on an Atlantis animated TV series, and even initiated plans to retheme a Disney park attraction around it. But Atlantis lived up to its mythological namesake, which is to say, it sank.
Pause for effect. Gentlemen, I'll take your questions now.
But while we're preparing to take a deep dive into the reasons why, maybe take a moment to subscribe to the Nerdstalgic channel. Atlantis: The Lost Empire sailed into theaters only to be met by mediocre reviews. It opened number 2 at the box office and would ultimately be deemed a financial disappointment, with even Thomas Schumacher, then president of Walt Disney Feature Animation, ultimately concluding it seemed like a good idea at the time to not do a sweet fairy tale, but we missed. The story found an eccentric millionaire sending nerdy novice cartographer Milo Thatch, along with a crew of unsavory mercenary types led by Commander Rourke.
Mercenary? I prefer the term adventure capitalist.
On a quest to find the lost civilization of Atlantis. The story was packed with underserviced characters, overly complicated exposition, and plenty of long, seemingly pointless action sequences. Critics and fans were mostly just left wondering how it went so wrong.
Thank God I lost my sense of taste years ago.
Well, shortly after the release of The Hunchback of Notre Dame in 1996, that film's creative team, including producer Don Hahn, directors Kirk Wise and Gary Trousdale, and screenwriter Tab Murphy, met to discuss pitching another movie to Disney. Hahn believed if they wanted to keep their production team together, they had to act fast. So they literally just drummed up an idea that day over lunch. Feeling exhausted by the Broadway musical-inspired formula that had been the heart of almost every major Disney animation released since 1989's Little Mermaid, the team decided to try something different. And despite how many classics Disney was able to produce using that formula, they weren't totally out of line. Eventually, the foursome hit on the idea of doing an animated version of the type of adventure films Walt Disney himself once produced in live action, like 20,000 Leagues Under the Sea. Instead of the fairy tales and songs that had become the norm, the film would be carried by fights and action sequences.
This entire land in Disneyland that's devoted to adventure. It's Adventureland, and we'd made a couple of Fantasyland movies. And we thought, wouldn't it be great to kind of turn left and make an Adventureland movie?
Over that same lunch, the group would come up with a plot they derived by crossing
Dirty Dozen goes to the center of the earth. What if we take sort of a team of hand-picked adventurers and send them on a journey into the earth to find a lost civilization?
Disney bought the pitch, and the potential of Adventureland movies sent ripples of excitement through the studio. While Murphy worked on the script, producers worked on finding a fresh visual style for the film. Production designers eventually settled on a look inspired by comic books, specifically the work of Hellboy creator Mike Mignola, who the team eventually brought on to design characters. Due to a power struggle at the highest levels of Disney that had most executives more concerned with other matters, the Atlantis creative team was given unprecedented levels of creative freedom. In the abstract, that sounds like a good thing. But when Murphy's script came in at an unwieldy 140 pages, and a screening of the first 2 acts in storyboard form lasted over 2 hours, everyone involved realized something had gone wrong. In an effort to focus on narrative, characters were eliminated, as were confrontations with monsters and other action set pieces. The creative team also decided to deprioritize the journey to Atlantis in favor of adding dimension to the Atlanteans themselves, as well as flush out the backgrounds of the mercenaries on Milo's team and his relationships with them. The more character-oriented approach came after they realized that the idea of Atlantis was only so exciting in and of itself. As Hahn put it, the lesson I learned is that people don't really care about a place, they care about the people. But the lack of a strong story would prove to be just the first bump in the road. Because after production had started, the team learned that the film's budget was being cut. The reduced resources would mean drastic sacrifices when it came to the animation. More action sequences would have to be eliminated, and in other instances, producers had to remove things like shadows from the art so the animators wouldn't have to animate them.
Maybe you're just in it for the money.
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 I'm going to say money.
Real-world events weren't helping things out much either. On April 20th, 1999, the Columbine High School shooting would stun the world. The tragedy also gave pause to the team working on Atlantis. The film was planned to have a high body count, and it was originally going to be more severe. Of the tonal changes, artistic supervisor John Sanford would later say, the hard edges got rounded off little by little. just because the company was used to making a certain type of film, and there were certain aspects of storytelling that made people at the time really nervous. With the film's story already in flux, it was decided late in production that the prologue, depicting a crew of Vikings searching for Atlantis and being attacked and killed by a sea monster, needed to be replaced. The creative team felt that the $5 million sequence, which was the first in the movie to be completed, was too focused on the journal Milo would later use to find Atlantis, and not enough on the city itself. It was completely scrapped and replaced by a new opening showing the destruction of Atlantis and introducing the Atlantean character of Kida. Despite the disarray, Disney still expected the movie to be a hit. The company started work towards rebranding Disneyland's famous 20,000 Leagues Under the Sea submarine voyage ride around the new Atlantis movie. At the same time, Disney Television Animation started production on a 22-minute animated spin-off of the film about Milo and his team that was said to be a dramatic adventure show in the spirit of the X-Files. Atlantis, alas, was not a hit.
We were once a great people, now we live in ruins.
In all fairness, by the time Atlantis: The Lost Empire arrived in theaters, the culture was already trending hard towards computer-animated films. Whatever role that may or may not have played, the proposed theme park attraction tie-ins would never materialize, and the submarine journey would instead be tied into Pixar's Finding Nemo. Work on the television series would also be halted, and the 3 episodes that were completed would eventually be released as a direct-to-video movie called Atlantis: Milo's Return, which holds a 24% audience score on Rotten Tomatoes. Atlantis would later pick up a cult following on home video, but if it had succeeded upon its release, it likely would have pushed Disney Animation in a new and more serious direction. But while the studio would eventually find room for darker and more adventure-driven non-musical films like Big Hero 6, the failure of Atlantis seemed to be one that stuck with them. It would be years before they returned to the more Broadway musical-driven format of the Golden Age, but Adventureland movies were over as quickly as they begun.
Let's go over it again, just so we got it straight. You didn't find anything.
Nope. Just a lot of rocks. Fish, little fish.
It's a shame too, because the idea of Adventureland movies is still pretty exciting, and films like Pixar's Up eventually gave us a taste of what a more successful version might have looked like. But whereas Up clearly has a creative spark at its heart, it's hard not to think that Atlantis might have been lacking one. Budget cuts and market shifts aside, so many of Atlantis' major problems feel like they come from the fact the whole thing was thrown together in a day to meet a deadline. Atlantis never seemed to really know what it was about, and in the end, it just wound up feeling like a haphazard mess of cliches in search of a story. The moral, as usual, is that if story and character don't come first, the tale is bound to end in disaster. So, what do you think? Did you see Disney's Atlantis? And if so, do you think it deserved better? Let us know down in the comments below, and if you enjoyed this video, you'll definitely find others you like if you check out the rest of the channel. As always, thank you for subscribing to Nerdstalgic.